Hello and welcome to episode 36 of the Not Yet Adults podcast. I, of course, am one of your hosts, Collin Geffrey, joined by the one and only times three, Eric Zayas.
It's your boy.
It's your boy coming at you live, 98.9 FM. No, it's not a radio show. That'd be cool. I don't know. Could we get on the radio? How hard is that? Who do we have to talk to make that happen?
Well, we probably have to make music to do that because I don't think they play podcasts on the radio. At least not most radio stations.
You do sometimes, don't you? Like NPR kind of stuff?
I'll get in contact with NPR and see if they'll play one of our 30-minute episodes in its entirety.
I mean, it's not that much. It's not like we're an hour show. That'd be ridiculous. But we're a half-hour show. I feel like that's reasonable.
That they can swing it.
Fair enough. We'll have all our people talk to their people.
Our people is just the two of us.
Well, I mean, the folks at home don't know that. For all they know, we have a whole staff working for us. We don't, but...
Sorry to pull the wool over people's eyes or however the saying goes, but it's just the two of us.
Speaking of just the two of us, Eric, how's life treating you? What's going on, man?
Pretty great. It's been a little hectic because I have a lot of things happening at the same time. Like I'm moving into my new place very soon.
Yeah, that's happening like this week, next week?
This week for some of my roommates and like next week for the rest. And we have to figure out like utilities and stuff and like paying rent and all this stuff and like moving in. And like, yeah, I just today finished painting my room like just in time for the people coming in who were doing carpets. Like I like woke up like 7 a.m. this morning and drove over to the house, finished painting, and then just sat around while it dried, and then basically cleaned up everything like right before the person who came to shampoo the carpets showed up, and then let him in and he did his thing.
So like stuff like that, like the cost of paint and like shampooing carpets and stuff, like are you guys all going in on that together, or is that like your job since it's your room, or like how's that kind of working?
I'm in charge of the payments and like the work for my room, and the landlady took care of the cost of the carpet cleaning. That was kind of part of our agreement in the lease, which was really nice of her.
That's fair. And also, I mean, like, it kind of puts the house in a nice condition when you're moving in, so everyone kind of knows, like, where the starting off point is. Well, yeah, that's exciting, man. That's, like, it's a big time. And, I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast before, but this is, like, a huge step in your life. So I feel like this is really cool that we're kind of getting to, like, monitor the situation week by week.
Yeah, dude. But enough about me. How's your life been holding up?
It's been busy. I've been doing more video freelance work. I have a couple clients now that are sending me regular or semi-regular work. Definitely not enough to move out, like nowhere close to that, but like I'm having a little bit of money coming in until I get a full-time gig, which is cool. Our dear friend Sam Ellefson yesterday just shot me a message asking me if I could help him with a project, and I said yes because it's Sam. And so I'm working on that. I'm gonna have a draft hopefully sent to him later tonight after we record this. And then I got a special project that I've talked with you about it off air a little bit. I don't know, probably shouldn't say anything on air yet. We might talk about it in like the next episode. So yeah, that's kind of me. It's just video stuff as per usual, but in a little bit higher quantity. And then just remembering like, hey, you need to go like eat and sleep sometimes because those are important things. So
yeah, I'm sure it's gonna get harder with how busy. It's funny how like we've talked about this before. Like graduating college. Like, after graduating college, I thought, oh, my schedule's going to open up a lot, and things are going to, I'm going to have a lot of downtime. And then I did for a little bit, but since I got more hours at work, and since I'm, like, doing a lot of, like, spinning a lot of plates right now with, like, moving out and stuff, I feel, like, really busy. And I'm, like, waking up super early on days. Like, the last 2 days, I had off work, but I still wake up at, like, 7 a.m. in the morning to like because I have stuff to do in the day,
which is the most like it's the weirdest disorienting thing when like you're in charge. Like it's not like a meeting or a job to the point where you definitely have to show up at 8 a.m. or whatever. It's just your own stuff you have to get done at your own pace, but you still have to wake up crazy early. It's the weird, not like 7's like that ridiculous, like some people are waking up at freaking 4, which is insane, but like when it's on your time and you're still having to wake up earlier than you'd like, that's just always a really bizarre feeling. So Eric, kind of on this train we seem to be riding here of sort of chaotic lives and stress and things like that, I wanted to talk about time management. And I feel like we touched on this maybe indirectly in other episodes, but I'm kind of curious what what your take on time management is. If you have a particular strategy, or if you just kind of let the chips fall and you just kind of adapt as you go, or how you sort of work the things you need to get done into your life on a daily or weekly basis.
It's difficult with a full time schedule that doesn't have set hours, because I have to like keep track of my schedule like on a weekly basis, and some people have to like um, are not fortunate enough to like know their schedule until they come into work. So I've tried to make time with friends that have like jobs where it's like, oh well, I don't know my work schedule. I have to, and I won't know until X date. But like with me, yeah, it's just I don't know. While I was going to school, I only worked on the weekends and it was a set schedule, so it was very easy to schedule around that. But now it's like, I could be working like 7 days in a row. I could be working 2 days and have a day off, and then working 3 days and have a day off, and then sometimes I work mid, sometimes I open, sometimes I close, which I hate closing shifts. So it's kind of all over the place, and I'm basically each week it's like a different like, okay, what's my work week this week? Okay, now here's how I'm gonna schedule my whole life around that, which is kind of a sad thing to say, but I mean that's adulthood.
I'm kind of two minds with that, because on the one hand, I feel like it's kind of nice to have that variety, and you don't slip into that sort of monotonous routine where you're not even really thinking. You're just basically a slave to your schedule. But on the other hand, it is so hard to plan anything when your work schedule's like that. So I mean, I know I worked at McDonald's for a year, at times full time, and usually it was somewhere between 20 and 30 hours a week. And I was very, very fortunate because my boss liked me, and after a while, they basically said like, you can choose your hours. And that was really, really cool because I could sort of build it around everything else, and I could kind of build my schedule the way I wanted to, and that was very, very enjoyable for me. But it wasn't always like that. And for a while when I worked there, that would give me like, sometimes it'd be like a 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift, and sometimes it would be like 2 to 10 p.m. And like it was just all over the board, and that's so difficult when you don't know any more than a week out what your life's going to be. And obviously a lot of people with hourly jobs or retail jobs or whatever it is, they know that that's literally their lives. And so I definitely have a lot of respect for people who have found a way to navigate that, whatever that is. Because I feel like when you're a kid, you see in movies and maybe your parents and stuff, you kind of get that drilled in your head of like, oh, you're going to have a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. job, and it's going to be Monday through Friday, and you're going to come home, and on the weekends you do the fun stuff, and then you start the process over. And for a lot of people, it's not quite that cut and dry.
We have very, and you've talked about this before, how like we're pretty similar people, but there's a lot of distinctions between each of us that make this podcast so interesting, and our work schedules are a big part of that, because I have a very set schedule and you kind of have like you kind of set your own schedule, and so it's there's a difference in that, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I almost feel guilty like comparing my quote unquote work schedule to your work schedule, because like you have an actual job.
Well, your job is a job. It's freelance. Freelance is a job.
I mean, it is, and no disrespect to other freelancers out there, but it's like my job is done intermittently between like us doing this podcast or me, checking in with my folks or whatever, like my life. And so like my office is, 4 feet away from my bed because my office is my desk. And like there's very little, if any, separation between work and non-work.
But a big part of your job isn't just the work itself. It's also like keeping up with the clients to get more work and finding new clients and like making sure that you're getting jobs in like that. To me, that's like, I don't want to worry you, dude, but to me that sounds terrifying. For me, I know like since I'm full time, I'm like legally guaranteed a certain amount of hours, and like I know that like, oh, by the end of this month I'll have enough money for rent because like I'm legally required to have this many hours, and as long as I show up and don't get fired, then I'll be able to pay rent and so forth. But right now where you are with your life, part of your job is not just the work, but also finding the work and keeping the work coming.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'd say, I mean, I don't have numbers, but I'd say I probably spend more hours a week submitting proposals or offers for jobs than I do actually working jobs. And I'm on a couple like sites that basically are like basically communities for freelancers. So people looking for freelancers can post their listings there, and then freelancers can submit proposals and bids for the jobs. And that's its own job, because you could send 20 proposals for 20 jobs a day and not land an interview or land the gig on any single one of them. Much like when you're sending out, resumes or job applications for full-time gigs. It's the same thing. And so it's tough. I mean, I've landed a couple clients, and hopefully I'm going to get, sort of ongoing work with them, but there's no guarantee, and you don't have the protection you have when you are working for, quote unquote, a traditional company or traditional 9 to 5 or whatever, where you have that job security there. And obviously I'm not bringing in enough money to, do much more than like pay student loans and a little bit of spending money right now. And so I either have to scale my client base way up or find a part-time job or a full-time job if I do want to move out in the near future, which is a goal of mine. So it's not sustainable yet, but I guess I'm working my way there, and I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And I guess that's this podcast, is just kind of updating people and reminding them like, hey, we don't have the answers. Oftentimes not nearly, even the answers that we should have already.
A quick aside about student loans I want to say is like that. Yeah, I just got like an email a little while ago, and it's starting, and so we should do a podcast about that pretty soon. I don't know how much we'll be able to talk about it, but yeah, like the first payment is like, for me, is due, I believe, in the December 26th. I kind of panicked for like a little bit, because like I looked at the email and it's like, click here to make first payment. I was like, okay, and I clicked on it, and then I had to log in. I was like, I don't remember the login information for this website.
Every single site that has different requirements for every password, and you're like, crap, I know it's some variation on this, but what's the actual? Yeah.
Usually when I make a new username and password for something like that I don't use very often, I write it down in the notes of my phone, and then I went to the notes of my phone, it wasn't there, so I was like, what do I do? And then I called them and got that information, but I was like, this is weird. I usually plan around this, but yeah, it's happening. But just going back really quick to what we're talking about with like busy work schedules. Do you find it difficult to find time for like friends and family, or is it kind of, do you find it works, making time for people works well with your schedule?
I'd say that's one of, if not the biggest things I struggle with. I remember towards the end of my time at PLU, I had a professor, I think I've talked about him on the show before, Vic Sweberg, who was one of, if not my favorite teachers there. He was wonderful. And he basically, just a very down-to-earth guy, and like the last class, he was like, he didn't like have an ego about it, but he was basically like, I've made a good career for myself. I rose to the ranks at Boeing. I think he was like senior vice president of Boeing or something like that. And he was like, I know a little bit, and what questions do you have for me? And I'm making it sound like he did it like very conceited, and that wasn't how it came across at all. But basically, like, what questions do you have for me as someone who's led a career already? And my question for him was, how do you have work-life balance? How do you do that? Because for me, just barely entering the world of work, that's already a problem I've seen for myself, is when I like a project, that is freaking all that's on my mind. And I'll ignore texts, and I'll ignore phone calls, and I'll forget to eat. And because when I care about something, I love working on it. Nothing else matters. And so, yeah, as I work on stuff, I find that it's really hard to spend time with family. Often I usually, by either noon or 1, I go upstairs and I check in with my mom, just see how her day's going, see if there's any stuff I can do around the house to help out, see kind of what the game plan is.
That's nice. You're a good son. I don't do that. I mean, I check in with mom, but I'm not like, hey, can I do more housework?
Well, and part of that is me trying to just be considerate and sensitive to the fact that I'm living with my parents rent-free, and the fact that at any given point, they could be like, hey, you need to start paying us a little money. And that's totally within their right. And I'm not going to fight that at all. But because that's not the case, I want to make sure I'm at least pulling my weight in some capacity. But yeah, honestly, I'm typically not upstairs again after that till probably 6 or 7 p.m. And that's hard because I only see my family, like twice a day. And it's usually not for more than an hour or so. And as far as friends, I mean, like, to be totally blunt, I don't think I have actually like physically gone and done something with a friend since I graduated. I don't think I've done that once. I do, like, this podcast with you, or occasionally I'll hop on and play Fortnite or something like that. But I don't think I've actually gone and done something with a friend in like 6 months, which isn't, I mean, there's a few reasons for that. One of which is like, I feel like a lot of the people that I consider some of my best friends these days are still in Tacoma, either at PLU or like you graduated. And sort of having graduated from high school and stuff, I feel like I found that a lot of the people I was close with during those years, I'm not really close with anymore. And so I can kind of count on one hand, like the people in Spokane that I still considered like to be my friends, and I just haven't had time, honestly. And I need to make time for that. I know that that's a sort of a character flaw on my part. It's something I need to work on. So I acknowledge the problem is there. I haven't gotten to the step of working on the problem quite yet.
Well, I think that's also speaks to like, and I don't want this to get too sad, but a sort of sad reality of the world where it's like some of our old friends that we don't talk to as much, or that we haven't talked to as in a while, like we don't necessarily always like get back in contact with, and like when we like graduate college and we kind of like move away from a lot of our old friends and make new friends with like jobs or like friends of friends and stuff like that. And that's kind of like, yeah, I mean, this is the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, a huge big chapter, and we're already like a pretty decent amount of pages into it, and so all of a sudden new characters are going to start being introduced into the story to complicate the plot. I don't know. This metaphor is kind of getting away from me.
No. I'm 100%. I'm right there with you. And like something this is kind of an aside, but whatever. It's the show. Something that's been on my mind lately is you'll have friends for years and years and years, these childhood friends that you know, and then you go away to college and you meet friends there and you have them there. And maybe it's because it's more recent, or maybe it's because your world is bigger now. But in some ways, I feel like the friendships I have with folks I met at PLU feel so much more sustainable and like they're going to be long-term friendships than friendships I've had with people for years and years and years. And I can't really explain that, but I have had friends that I was friends with for like 8, 9, 10 years that I just don't talk to anymore. And that could be entirely my fault. It could be a combination of both of our faults. Yeah, I don't know if it's just because it happened more recently, but I feel like friends I made at PLU in a lot of ways feel like those friendships are more meaningful, or at least are going to last longer than some other ones that I have had over the years.
I actually have a theory that, about that, and I think part of why, like when you move to a new place for a while and come back, or when you like go to like school specifically, I think a big reason why you might not like get in contact with like old friends is because while you're at school, your personality sort of changes and you develop with the people around you, and you kind of all like the people you're with during your time at school, you kind of start to click with, and like your personality kind of gets molded to them and their personality gets molded to you, and that creates friendship. And then when you move back, you're like a different person, not drastically different, but you like kind of think in the sort of way that friends from school, specifically for us PLU, kind of thought. So you're being shaped in a different way while you're away, and then when you come back, you know, you might not be the same necessarily compatible shape with the people you used to know.
I think that's totally true. And I mean, you always hear when you're growing up, family or relatives or whatever telling you that one, college is very formative years of your life, and two, that the people you meet in college are the people you're going to know for your whole life. And I feel like it's easy to take that for granted until you go through that. But I mean, so far, and very short-sighted, I'm only 20, I hopefully have a long life ahead of me, but I think that's very much true. I think I personally, in my experience, found that to be true very much. Anyway, I've kind of been going on a monologue here. What about you, Eric, as far as finding time for friends and family and balancing that with, the work and the more productivity side of your life? How do you find you mix all that together?
Yeah, well, I try to make time for friends. I've been doing that pretty well. Kind of, luckily, my friends want to hang out around like the same time that I just happen to be off work. As far as making time for family, I feel like I haven't really been doing a great job of that, and like every time I come home from work, I kind of just go straight to my room. And that's just going to get harder when I move out, so that's kind of a bummer. So I definitely have to make even more of an effort now that I'm moving out to come home and spend time with family. And yeah, so that's definitely something I struggle with, and I want to work on more, managing less time with friends and more time with family. Because I feel like I've been neglecting them, and that's not cool, and I feel like a bad like brother and like son because of that.
Well, and I mean, just to defend you for a second, just before you throw yourself on the train tracks, like I throw yourself in front of the train. I'm mixing metaphors, but Um, when you go to work and you're spending the day there and that's taxing, and you get home, it's not that you don't love your family, and I'm maybe I'm projecting here. I don't mean to speak for you, but it's kind of still work to like interact with someone and spend time with someone in like a quality way.
That is so true, dude.
Yeah, and so it's not that like you don't care about them, but it's like I just need to be by myself. I just need to like lay down and just put on the dumbest thing I can find on TV and just not do anything for a little bit. Like and it's not that you don't care about your family, it's just that it takes a certain level of emotion and energy to spend time with someone, even if it's someone you know very well.
Yeah. Also, the place I am right now with my life, a part of like okay, so I recently um, got out of a like my first relationship, and so I've been dating other people, and so not only am I making time for or trying to make time for friends and kind of struggling to make time with family, but also I'm like figuring out like I've been talking to different women and like figuring out times to go out with them, and so it's and also since I'm moving to a place all and like with work, it's kind of like everything's a lot of things are happening at once. It kind of reminds me of being like back in school and like all these different assignments kind of like being due at around the same time, and so I'm kind of being brought to that in like a more personal, less structured way.
Well, and exactly what you said right there that came to mind for me is less structured. Of school, even college, is sort of an artificial environment in the sense that it creates your schedule for you, not the other way around. The vast majority of things you have to do, whether it's meetings or clubs or assignments or presentations or whatever, someone says this is when it has to be done by, and then you plan around that. As opposed to post graduation, obviously your job probably has set hours for you, but everything else needs to get done, and it's on you not only to do it, but to figure out when you're going to be able to do it. And that in its own is so difficult because every single day, if you really want to think about it enough, you go to bed having done not nearly as much as you could have. There's always more you could have gotten done that day. And no matter what your life is like, you always could have put in more work that day than you did.
Oh god, that's so true, dude. And that like it's so true it hurts.
You hit a point of diminishing return after a while if all you do is trying to get productivity stuff done, because after a while, you're not being able to work as well and you're not functioning as well as a person if you don't have that time to unplug. And if you don't have that time to spend with friends or go out dating or spend with your family or whatever, you are a more well-rounded person when you have all of those things in your life and not just work or just free time or whatever.
And also we can't forget to mention the importance of like finding time for ourselves and like not just like socializing, but also there's like decompression time that we also have to work into our schedules and like that. I feel like I've part of one of the reasons I've been struggling to find time for family specifically is because when I come home, since I immediately go to my room, I like consider my time at home like me time, and that means that like when family members want to like, sit down and watch TV, I get in my head a stronger desire to just like go to my room and go on the computer and just like be away from people. And it's not a thing personally against them. It's just that, like you said, I've been working the whole day and I've been around a lot of people, and I just want to be alone. And that they kind of see they get the short end of the stick on that end.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for you too much, but I would guess that after you move out here in the next couple of weeks, that will probably improve. Because when you're living with someone, first of all, there's not as much separation there, and you don't necessarily appreciate their company or the time with them as much as you maybe would if you're making a point to go see them, because they're just kind of always there. And so your time at home and your time with family and your time by yourself, those lines all kind of blur, and it's hard to maybe appreciate any of those individually. But when you're off living on your own, and your time with your family will be when both of you make time for it and go do something, or you go over there and you guys just hang out for a little while, when you're making an effort to spend time together, I feel like that's going to be a lot easier.
I hope that rings true, and the logic you put around that kind of makes it seem like it rings true. So I feel better.
It's all going to work out, man. Our life's going to be perfect. But yeah. Well, Eric, we're just under typically how long the show lasts for, but I feel like we kind of hit an organic kind of ending point. I feel like we kind of put in an honest day's work, as it were. Yeah. One thing we should mention is Eric and I made the decision to not do episodes next week. which is the first time we've actually done that. We haven't taken a week off since we started the show. And there's actually kind of some cool stuff happening in both of our lives that we want to talk about on the next episode, but it just didn't make sense. It was basically going to be us like recording for hours over the weekend and then trying to rush to get them uploaded before other stuff happened, and it just wasn't going to be good for anybody.
Yeah, next week is really hectic for both of us, and we'll definitely have a lot of stuff to talk about the week after that in regards to that. But like, because of like all the stuff that's happening that we're going to talk about, we can't also fit in a podcast where we talk about it.
So yeah, we're taking the week off. It's not because we're lazy, we promise. It's if anything, it's the opposite. And then we'll be back. And so I'm looking at my calendar here. I want to say it'll be Monday, December 10th will be our next episode. And we'll fill you in on where we've been. We got some cool stuff to talk about. And that'll be that. And that's all I have to say there. Eric, was there something you wanted to say before I went on that tangent there?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious if you had any like personal takeaway or advice that had to do with time management, and I'll throw in my 2 cents after you give yours.
I mean, there's something that comes to mind. I want to say I've said this on the show before, but there's something that Philip DeFranco has said in some of his YouTube stuff, which is you basically have these 3 pillars in your life. You have family, you have friends, and you have work. And if you do the best you can at one of those things, then 2 of them kind of fall to the wayside. And if you do pretty good at 2 of those things, the third one just completely crumbles. And that's kind of a very pessimistic way of looking at it. But if you take that groundwork, sort of thinking of it as those 3 pillars, and maybe there's a 4th pillar, which is, decompression or alone time or whatever. But if you kind of think of life in that way, if you have those 3 or 4 pillars, just kind of be honest with yourself and say, which 1 or 2 of these pillars am I not doing a very good job with? And I feel like at least most people, I feel like probably have the self-awareness to really say, I need to spend more time with my family, or man, my work's really suffering lately, or whatever it may be. Find that thing that you know you need to work on, because obviously that's the hardest part, and then just make an effort. And it may be kind of a juvenile or silly way of doing it, but being like, okay, from 6 to 7, I'm going to go hang out with friends, or this night of the week is only going to be for decompression, or I need to work at least these many hours every day, but sort of build it in an artificial way so that you can work on it until it just becomes routine and until you don't have to think about it anymore. But you sort of have to exaggerate it at first, and then eventually it'll just become normal for you. So that's my advice, and obviously I need to practice what I preach because I have problems with this too. But that's, if I could suggest anything, it'd probably be that.
I feel like that's also a very adult thing. Like when you get older, you have more experience and you can give better advice, but whether you follow that advice is a different story entirely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's kind of the weird thing about our show is like it's loosely somewhere between like storytelling and advice, I guess. But like also we're kind of scrolling up at the same time. So sometimes it is kind of silly that we're giving advice based on the positions that we're in, but that's, it is what it is.
I think any advice that I have to say, and this is something I need to work on, I've worked on it before. I've definitely got better at it, but like, and this is specifically for anyone who might still be in school or struggling with like work and stuff. I think if you find yourself in a place where like after a while you kind of like get into like a routine, and you kind of figure out a way to work your schedule or work around your schedule. But if you find yourself kind of like hitting your head against the wall and like, finding yourself like really high in stress, I think you need to like take a moment and breathe and figure out what's the problem, because that could mean you're like overworking yourself, or you're maybe not managing your time super effectively, or maybe like you're putting too much on your plate or biting off more than you can chew. And there has to sometimes come a moment when you think, well, maybe I need to like, do a little bit less and just kind of work around that. Or sometimes you find that maybe you need to do more. I don't know.
Well, and you mentioned a word in there, routine, that I feel like for me in particular has become kind of a dirty word over the last couple of years. Because like you think of staying organized and getting all this stuff done as what you need to do. But I feel like for me personally, the idea of a routine is just such a turnoff. Of you just feel like you're a slave to your schedule or to your calendar or to your phone, And so, I mean, to your point, when you do find that maybe you're working too hard or not enough, maybe it's just you need to take a hard left turn and try something new, whether that's more structure, less structure, or being spontaneous or not being spontaneous, whatever it is. Just entertain the idea of, changing things up instead of just trying the same thing and hoping it works out.
Different strokes for different folks, as they say. And we like to say here on the Not Yet Adults podcast, I want to thank everyone for listening. I love each and every one of you. And I want you to know that Not Yet Adults podcast comes to you every Monday and Friday, except for next week when we're taking that week off. But typically every Monday and Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube, SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much every podcast service imaginable. We're also on the social medias. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Not Yet Adults, and also we have our own subreddit, r/Not Yet Adults, which would be really awesome if you checked it out. If you have the time, we really appreciate if you could support the podcast. Could you just head over to Apple Podcasts or iTunes if you're on iOS and leave us a rating and review? That would be awesome. It only takes a few minutes of your time, and it really helps out the show. We would love you to share your thoughts and feelings and let us know if you love us, if you hate us, preferably more if you love us. It would be awesome. Again, we'll be back next Monday, right?
Yeah, I mean, next Monday, like a week and a half, yeah.
We'll be back to you next Monday at 9 a.m. talking about something new, and we can't wait to get a hold of your ears. We love you. This has been Not Yet Adults.
Bye-bye.